They said she aged 40 years in 1 second, just because she smiled. The government called it natural degeneration. Officials released no name, no image. But those who glimpsed her, the ones quick enough to see before the scene was sealed, off whispered another truth. She had smiled beneath the shadow of the abandoned clock tower. Her body had been found curled peacefully, skin creased in deep, sudden folds, like parchment pulled too tight and then let go. Her hair, they said, was silver white, not from age, but from the instantaneous burnout of youth. And yet, her lips were gently curved. Her eyes, half-lidded, still glimmered with something long forgotten in this city: joy. They buried her. Story like they buried her body quietly, without ceremony. But the image escaped. Liana Ashir received it 2 nights later, slid under her door in a plain gray envelope. No name, no return address. Inside, a printed photograph. The woman lay on stone, face folded with time, but calm, content, and unmistakably smiling. Liana stared at the curve of her mouth as if it might move again. Something stirred inside her chest. A memory, maybe, or a warning. Beneath the photo, a single line was handwritten in smudged ink. Remember what it means to live. Clock tower, 3:13 a.m. She read the sentence again, and again. Then looked up at her wall. 1:48 a.m., her apartment was silent. Like every other box-shaped home in Sector 11, the motion sensors in the corners blinked red, tracking movement, monitoring expressions. Anything over a 5% facial deviation would be flagged and uploaded to the Department of Emotional Compliance. Liana stayed expressionless. Outside, the city slept under grayscale light. Drones floated silently between towers, cameras stitched into their shells, eyes that never blinked. Emotion had become a liability 20 years ago, after the discovery of AIDS, accelerated emotional degeneration syndrome. The science was clean. Every time you smiled, your cells aged. Wrinkles formed, hair grayed, organs broke down. People started dying young, but only the happy ones. Now, emotion was a crime. Joy, a fatal indulgence. Even babies were trained with gentle shocks to keep neutral expressions. Children were taught that a smile wasn't kindness, it was suicide. And yet, here it was, a woman who had smiled, willingly, and left behind a face that looked more human than any Liana had seen in years. She thought of her mother laughing in the kitchen with soapy hands. She had died too young, but she had died with smile lines carved deep across her face. Laughter had been her crime. Liana glanced once more at the clock. 2:03 a.m. She should sleep. Forget. Report the envelope. But her fingers were already grabbing her coat. Her feet were already moving toward the door. Whatever was waiting beneath that clock tower, it was worth the risk, even if it aged her. The wind clawed at Liana's coat as she crossed the abandoned plaza. The clock tower loomed above, its hands frozen forever at 11:43, the exact minute, they said, when the last public smile had been recorded. That was 19 years ago. The streets were deserted, silent as tombs. No foot traffic, no drones here. This area had been declared emotionally contaminated after a riot of laughter broke out during the early days of the AIDS panic. People had danced in the streets, hugging, crying, clinging to joy while it killed them. Now, all that remained was stone, silence, and a single point of mystery: the door beneath the clock tower. Liana reached it and paused. A thick iron hatch stood half open, the darkness behind it yawning like a secret. She hesitated only a second before ducking inside. Cool air slid across her face. The world outside vanished as she descended rusted metal steps into the hollow belly of the tower. She counted the floors, 3 down, then 4. At the 5th level, a voice stopped her. Careful, it said. The air down here makes people feel alive. That can be dangerous. She turned sharply. A man stood near an old fuse box, scarf pulled over his mouth, only his eyes visible, dark, watchful, alert. "Are you from the department?" Liana asked. He chuckled, and even that sound felt illegal. "Hardly. If I were, you'd already be sedated and reprocessed. Come on." He led her through a narrow corridor and pushed open a heavy steel door. It creaked like something ancient. And then light spilled through. Liana stepped into a room she couldn't quite believe was real. There were people, not many, maybe 20, scattered across cushions, stools, even the floor. Every one of them looked old, but not broken. Their faces were etched with lines deep, undeniable, but their eyes were sharp, vivid, awake, and the air had pulsed with something warm. It took her a moment to recognize it. Laughter, quiet, restrained, but real. One man was chuckling, and a silent cartoon projected on the far wall, a vintage animation where animals danced and tripped over their feet. A woman in a faded green coat was humming something soft, eyes closed, rocking a wrinkled hand to her chest. It felt like being dropped into a lost world. Someone approached a woman, short and silver-haired, with crow's feet carved deep into her skin. "You must be Liana," she said gently. "I'm Mira. We've been waiting for—" "What?" "For someone who still dreams of smiling," Mira said. "We're the Crinkle Club, and we believe that aging through joy is better than living in fear." Liana stared. "But this is suicide." "No," Myra said, eyes twinkling. "This is living." And for the first time in 2 decades, Liana felt something stir behind her cheekbones, a twitch, a soft pull upward. The ghost of a smile. They didn't pressure her to smile. No one in the Crinkle Club asked for proof of commitment, or for declarations of rebellion. They only welcomed her, quietly, gently. Liana sat on a floor cushion near the back of the room, watching, listening, breathing in air that felt strangely thick like memory, like childhood. The kind of space that carried old warmth instead of cold rules. Someone passed her a steaming mug of cocoa. Real cocoa. She hadn't tasted it since the age of 8, when flavor additives were banned for triggering nostalgia-based joy. The scent alone unlocked something in her chest, an old ache, but a sweet one. The projector played on, showing flickers of the past. Birthday parties, couples laughing on roller coasters, children losing their minds with giggles as they tumbled in ball pits. Liana had forgotten these sounds. They felt almost holy now. "You don't have to rush," Mira said beside her. "It'll come when it's ready." Liana looked at her. The lines around Mira's mouth were deep, almost carved. Proof that this woman had spent years smiling, even under the shadow of death. But there was nothing brittle in her. If anything, she looked full. "Don't you miss being young?" Liana asked quietly. Mira laughed. "Oh, I was never young. Not really. Not until I started aging the right way." That night, back in her apartment, Liana lay awake with the lights off. She couldn't sleep. Not with the echoes of laughter still swirling in her skull. Not with the warmth of cocoa still lingering on her tongue. She got out of bed and padded barefoot across the concrete floor to the bathroom. Her reflection stared back, pale and smooth, 25 years old, frozen in time. But it felt wrong now, empty, as if her face had been paused instead of lived in. She thought of the woman beneath the clock tower, silver-haired, smiling. Her lips twitched. Just a little dot. No one was watching. No compliance drones. No motion sensors in this tiny mirror-lined square. Just her. And her decision. Liana let the corners of her mouth lift. It wasn't wide. It wasn't even confident. But it was real. And then came the pain. Not sharp, but immediate, like something cracking deep inside her skin. Her vision blurred. Her hands flew to her face. She gasped. There, on the right side of her cheek, a line thin, barely visible in the low light. But it was there. Her first wrinkle. Tears sprang to her eyes. Not from pain, from the overwhelming rush of feeling, of having done something not to survive. but to be alive. She touched the wrinkle like it was sacred, but then a soft beep echoed from the ceiling. Cold, metallic dot motion detected. Her eyes widened. Up in the corner, one of the old facial monitors blinked red, one she thought had stopped working years ago. She was wrong. She had smiled, and now, they knew. The red light blinked only once, but that was all it needed to. Liana stood frozen, hand still resting against her cheek, as the sensor quietly uploaded its data to the Department of Emotional Compliance. Facial recognition, timestamp, coordinates, smile, classification. She backed away from the mirror slowly, blood pounding in her ears. She didn't breathe until the light faded and the screen went black again. Maybe it didn't send. Maybe it glitched. Mybia? Loud knock shattered the silence. 3 precise mechanical pounds. Not from a fist, from an enforcement baton. They were here. Liana's heart tried to punch its way out of her chest. Her mind screamed for stillness, for logic, for any explanation she could give that wouldn't land her in a rehabilitation facility. Or worse, a neutrality chamber, where smiling was chemically burned out of you. Another knock. Harder. Miss Liana Ashir, Department of Emotional Compliance. Open the door. She forced herself to breathe. Coming, she called, masking the fear in her voice as best she could. She moved to the door, fingers trembling. Her thoughts raced. How long had they been watching? Was the wrinkle already visible? Could she lie? But more than fear, one thought kept rising above the panic. She didn't regret the smile, not even a little. The door hissed open. 2 officers stood in the corridor, faces covered by chrome half-masks. Their uniforms were black, rigid, emotionless, much like the rest of society had become. One held a small tablet. The other carried a scanner wand. "We registered abnormal muscle movement from your unit," the first officer said flatly, cheek and jaw tension exceeding regulated thresholds. Liana didn't blink. "I was yawning." The second officer stepped forward and scanned her face. The wand hummed. No matching biometric pattern for yawn reflex detected. The first officer tapped the tablet. Possible smile, Category 1. Early stage violation. Liana swallowed hard. It was involuntary. A twitch. There was a long pause. The officers looked at each other. Then, surprisingly, the one with the scanner took a step back. "Your record is clean," he said. "We'll issue a warning, but your unit is now on facial watch list status. Any further deviation I understand," Liana said quickly. "Good." They turned and left without another word. The door hissed shut behind them. Liana stood alone again, but not unchanged. She ran to her sketchpad, pulling it from its hiding spot beneath the floor panel. Her fingers were still shaking as she flipped to a blank page, and then she drew. She didn't think. She let her hands remember what joy looked like. She sketched the woman beneath the clock tower, then Mira, laughing softly, then the man at the projector, then herself, but older, wiser. Smiling. A knock had almost taken everything from her, and now she knew it was time to give something back. The next night, she didn't knock. She simply descended, down the iron steps, past the 5th floor, heart pounding in rhythm with each clang of her boots. This time, no one stopped her. No voice in the dark. No questions, as if they already knew she was coming. When she entered the room beneath the clock tower, 20 faces turned toward her, and every single one smiled. It was subtle, quiet, but unmistakable, as if her very presence confirmed something they'd all been waiting for. Mira was the first to step forward, a small flicker of triumph behind her tired eyes. "So," she said, "you felt it too, didn't you?" Liana nodded slowly. "They came to my door. Compliance officers. The system caught my smile, and you're still here. They let me off with a warning." Mira chuckled, her wrinkles folding in soft familiar patterns. "They always do. The first time, The system still thinks people like you can be corrected. I can't be corrected, Liana whispered. Mira leaned in. Then maybe you're ready. They gathered in a circle that night, under the faint hum of old lights powered by hacked wires and forgotten currents. Mira stood in the center, her hands clasped around an old leather-bound book, a relic of the past. We've been waiting, she began, for someone the city wouldn't expect. Someone young, clean record, someone who can move between their world and ours without suspicion. Her eyes found Liana's. Now we plan. Liana glanced around. Plan what? The last act of joy, Mira said. One night, one gathering, one moment where we let ourselves be human, before the system erases us completely. She opened the book and turned it to show them a faded photograph. A massive crowd, people laughing, crying, hugging, cheering. Liana recognized it instantly. The famous day of the last parade. The final public celebration before smiling was outlawed. We recreate this, Mira said. Just once. One last time. A murmur spread through the group. You're talking about mass exposure, said an old man with trembling hands. Some of us won't survive. I know, Mira replied gently, but some of us were never really alive in the first place. Liana looked at the photo again. Thousands of people caught in a single frame of joy. No masks, no fear, and she saw it now clearly. Smiling didn't kill you, suppressing it did. Later that night, as the room thinned out, Mira handed Liana a folded piece of paper. The location, the time. Don't say it aloud. Don't even read it near a device. Liana slipped it into her coat without looking. When she asked, Myra smiled, slow and certain. Soon, very soon. Back in her apartment, Liana opened her sketch pad again. This time, she drew the future. Lines of people, arms around each. Other mouths open in laughter. Faces old and glowing. Not broken, but whole. She added one more wrinkle to her own face, and smiled. It began with a whisper. A smile here, a nod there. Strangers locking eyes on silent trams. A gentle tug at the corner of a mouth. In a world where emotions were crimes, even anticipation became rebellion. By the time the city lights dimmed at 11 p.m., as they always did, a quiet current pulsed beneath the concrete surface, like a heartbeat no one could silence anymore. And deep below the streets, in the crumbling skeleton of the old subway terminal, Smile Night began. Liana stood at the edge of the abandoned platform, her breath visible in the cold air. Around her, people gathered in twos and threes, appearing from shadows like ghosts who'd found their bodies again. They came in coats and scarves and tattered uniforms, hair silvered with time, eyes shining with something far more dangerous than courage. Mira lit the first lantern, not electric, but flame. Its glow spilled warmth across her lined face, setting the age in her skin alight like gold. Liana had never seen anything more beautiful. Tonight, Mira said, her voice barely above a whisper, we give our years freely. We give them for a memory and for a future. Liana stepped forward. She had no speech, no grand words, just a choice. She removed her coat, revealing her face, older now than just days ago. The wrinkle on her cheek had deepened. Another had appeared beside her eye. She didn't hide them. She let herself smile. It bloomed slowly, rising not just from her mouth, but from her chest, her ribs, her entire being. It hurt, yes. There was an ache behind her eye, a tightness in her temples. But oh God, it was real. A wave moved through the crowd. First one, then another, then dozens. Smiles began to emerge like sunlight through storm clouds, wide open, defiant. Some began to laugh. A few danced in place. Someone pulled a small speaker from their bag and played an old song, tinny and broken, but unmistakably joyful. Then the projector flickered on. Images from the old world splashed across the concrete wall. Children blowing birthday candles. Grandmothers laughing at bad jokes. Friends clinking glasses. Lovers sharing kisses and chocolate. And messy, loud, perfect laughter. Tears fell freely. So did years. Wrinkles bloomed like flowers on faces too long kept still. Hair turned gray. Knees buckled. But no one stopped. Liana felt the shift in her bones. A weight, a warmth, a truth her body had forgotten how to carry. She was alive, for the first time, really alive above them, in the control rooms of the Department of Emotional Compliance. Red alarms began to blink. Unauthorized gathering detected. Biometric spikes. Laughter confirmed. The system stirred, and the silence it had enforced for decades was about to be shattered. But in that terminal, beneath layers of concrete and fear, joy was louder than fear had ever been, and Liana, aging, aching, glowing, smiled wider. The storm came in silence. No sirens, no warnings. Just black boots on forgotten stone. Compliance officers poured into the subway tunnel like liquid shadow. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, masks locked in place, batons humming with sedative current, eyes that didn't blink, faces that didn't move. But inside the terminal, no one ran. They saw the figures forming at the edge of the light, the humming noise, the weapons, the end. Still, no one ran. Liana stood in the center, surrounded by smiles. Mira reached for her hand and squeezed it. The projector kept playing. The laughter kept rising. It was already too late. The officers moved in, surrounding the crowd like vultures descending on light. One of them raised a megaphone, his voice cold and precise. "You are in violation of Article 17, unregulated expression. Cease movement. Cease expression. Cease emotion." No one obeyed. Instead, a child, maybe 6 or 7, let out a giggle, high-pitched, wild, free, the kind of sound no child in this city had ever been allowed to make. The lead officer twitched. "Repeat. Cease expression or force will be." Mira stepped forward. "You've already lost." Her voice echoed through the underground like prophecy. "Even now, up there, someone's smiling just thinking about us. You can't unmake that. You can't erase joy once it's remembered." Then she turned to Liana. Now, Liana stepped onto the small wooden crate at the heart of the gathering, the makeshift stage. Her knees were weak, her vision blurred. Her heart beat like thunder inside her chest. The wrinkle on her cheek deepened. She felt another form across her forehead, but she didn't hide them. She looked directly into the helmeted faces surrounding them, and smiled, wide, full, radiant. She raised her arms. "Let them see," she said. "Let the world see that we lived, that we chose joy, even if it costs us everything." All around her, the Crinkle Club responded. Laughter rolled like a wave. Arms lifted, faces opened. Some were sobbing, smiling through tears. Others dropped to their knees from the weight of sudden aging, but kept grinning through it all. The compliance officers didn't move, because they didn't know how to stop it. This wasn't a protest. This was freedom. One officer removed his mask. He couldn't help it. A smile tugged at his lips before he turned away. The footage leaked within hours. Someone, no one knew who, hacked into the surveillance feed and broadcast the final 10 minutes of Smile Night to every private screen. In Sector-11. No edits. No filters. Just faces.old. Glorious, defiant, smiling, in a quiet home miles away. A woman covered her mouth and cried. She hadn't felt anything in years. In a classroom, a teacher paused mid-lesson, a tear slipping down her cheek. And in the bedroom of a young child, a finger traced a wrinkle that wasn't there the day before. It had begun. They found her body the next morning, just outside the subway terminal. Liana Ashir, face folded with time, eyes half closed, wrinkles carved deep and proud, skin loosened by joy, and on her lips, even in death, a smile, not one of peace, but a victory. The department classified it as a mass emotional contagion event. Smile Night was buried beneath redacted reports and encrypted statements. Compliance swept the tunnels clean, removed the projectors, and sealed the exits with reinforced steel. But they were too late, because people had seen it, and more importantly, they had felt it. In the weeks that followed, Compliance doubled its patrols. Emotional monitors were upgraded. Schools banned eye contact for children under 10. New PSAs warned, every smile costs you something. Don't let joy steal your future. But the problem wasn't joy. The problem was memory. It had already taken root. A girl in Sector 9, barely 11, drew her first smiling face in the corner of her textbook. She didn't know why. It just felt right. A middle-aged train operator turned off the facial monitor in his cabin for 8 seconds, just long enough to grin at an old photo of his mother. And in a nursing home on the edge of the city, a woman with silver hair and deep crow's feet whispered Liana's name to a nurse who had never known what a real smile looked like. Until that moment, Myra was never seen again. Some say she died beside Liana that night, too aged to move, too content to care. Others believe she escaped, that she's out there, somewhere, finding others, teaching them how to live freely, even if briefly. But no matter where she went, her words remained, scribbled in chalk on city walls, whispered between strangers, carved into the backs of sketchbooks. Joy is not safe, it's sacred. And the sketchbook, Liana's dot, it survived, smuggled out by someone in the crowd, passed from hand to hand, copied and hidden, rewritten in dozens of ways. It contained only images, no instructions, no manifestos, just faces. Dozens of them, smiling, aging, alive. Some looked scared. Some looked radiant. Some looked like they were smiling through pain. But all of them were choosing to feel, to be. Years later, in a dusty library basement, a boy found a wrinkled drawing tucked between forgotten pages. He didn't know her name, didn't recognize her face, but something about the sketch made the corners of his mouth lift, just slightly. It stung. His head throbbed. His bones ached for a second. A fine line appeared beside his left eye, so faint no one else would notice. But he did. He traced it in the mirror and whispered to himself, like a secret he was now part of, "This is how I know I'm alive."